Hi, welcome back to the Dylan Brown's case. Welcome if you're currently here in the live chat. I appreciate it. Shout out to Indiana, I think I might have said that wrong, and Cleo for their previous presence in the last video. So today, what we're going to be doing, something a little bit more visual, a little bit more creative, if you want to call it that. Finally doing the tier list of significance, a hierarchy of certain evidence, right? I'm doing it from what I know of, whether it be found, returned, or still missing. I've arranged it in a certain order of importance, and I can explain the reasons for my choices, okay, as we go along. If there's time, I'll return to the maps just to show you visually where these items have been found, returned, etc. and try and understand why they turned out the way they did, because the way I see it, there's certain items which have been found and others that are missing, and it's like, but why? And some things that have been returned and other things that haven't, and it's like, but why? And it will make more sense when we get further on into this video, okay? So in the live chat, you can share your own thoughts, opinions, and reactions as we go along. If you think the list is in the incorrect order, if you have a different order, feel free to leave it down below in the comment section, and if you want, explain why you think one item is more important over the other, okay? So yeah, I think we might as well just get right on into it. Also, I will try and map out Don Haley's place of living. It's not going to be pretty, it's going to be rough, okay? But I'll demonstrate it to you because as an example of my body, my mind failing on itself, just to make things realistic, because there's too much delusional positivity out there, okay? So let's head on over to the slides and begin with the first item. So in 7th place, the least important piece of evidence is Dylan's wallet. Now this actual piece of evidence, possession of Dylan's, is still missing from what I know of. If you have heard any other stories or rumours regarding the wallet, feel free to list it down below in the chat or comment section. The reasoning behind why this is the least important is because the contents within are limited. There's not a load of money. That never seemed to be the case. From Candice Cooley's recollections of Dylan, his pattern of behaviour financially, most of the money would be in the bank. If he did receive money, it would be via a cheque, such as the 32k cheque from Custom Farming, which went straight into his account. So he didn't have much loose money on him. In addition, once a month he'd draw out about $140 worth of money, and that's it. So you could argue it's not money driven, taking Dylan out, hurting him, killing him. But it does make you wonder, why was the wallet taken off Dylan? And why is it missing? Is it the person that took it assumed that money would be inside of it? There'd be some use. And then when finding out, oh, there's no money in here, the person chucked it away. Possibly. But why is it that the least significant item such as this has not been recovered, and yet more valuable pieces of evidence have been retrieved? Do you see what I'm saying? This is the reasoning, and this is trying to understand the way it's gone, because there seems to be like a weird pattern, not just in behaviour of a person or people, how they dealt with dealing and disposing of Dylan, but the evidence too. Now, besides money within the wallet, which might have been very limited, what about the card itself? Sure, you can access maybe the bank of Dylan's, possibly, but don't you still need additional details? You might not have them. Most important thing is, regardless though, is that from what Candice Cooley has said, the family overall, there have been no bank transactions. Nothing of that post Dylan's disappearance. No one's accessed his bank account. No one has withdrawn any money, which is possibly, I guess, understandable because you don't want to be traced. You want to try and keep and lay low in a way, right? But there is another reason. If it's not money driven in the first place, the suspect doesn't care about money. That doesn't interest them. That could be the likes of Brenner. You know, you look at Brenner, he's a lazy slob, as described by other people. Didn't seem like he was too obsessed about money. You know, just living in peace, away from it all, away from most people, just drinking a few beers, relaxing, I guess, maybe hanging out with Don at times. So if it was Brenner, let's say, that got a hold of the wallet, it might have just been, oh, let's see what is inside. Oh, not much. I have no use for it. You know what I'm saying? But if you think different, feel free to list it down below. I mean, if it truly meant nothing to the individual, the suspect, then why would it be missing? I mean, I don't know if I've mentioned it already, but we must also understand that there's a possibility that some items may have been on Dylan at the time he went missing. And if Dylan has not been found and those items were on Dylan, well, that's likely why they've not been found either, right? You could be wondering, why would Dylan's wallet be on him if he's farming? You know, he leaves his gun behind in the truck. What about the phone? Well, the phone was retrieved. We'll get more into that later. Possibility that Dylan could have been in possession of the phone, most likely, and that was the one possession taken off Dylan because there was more significance behind it for what it could behold or what it could reveal in different ways. We'll make more sense of that later. Bear in mind, I'm just giving you my brief opinion to why I chose this order, and later we can kind of group it together and understand any additional points, right? So my guess would be that Dylan's wallet could be on Dylan still. Okay? If you think different, feel free to list it down below. Let's move on to the next one. At number 6, it's Dylan's phone. You might be wondering, why is this so low down the list of significance? Surely this would be very important, right? Well, it would be if the contents on the phone was of value. From when the family cloned Dylan's phone, checked his accounts, checked his messages, call logs, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing strange. Sure, it showed that Dylan tried calling Brenner, but Brenner did not answer or call back, so there was no way of hearing an exchange or conversation. As for a voicemail, I don't know if that was in the question. If you know anything about a voicemail on Dylan's phone, make sure to list it down below. From my knowledge, I've not really heard much on that. Aside from the call log, nothing odd in the search history, on the internet, no strange notes, no strange photos or videos. So with lack of content on the phone, there's not much suspicion. It doesn't really lead to anywhere. The phone itself probably was on Dylan at the time and was taken off him by maybe Brenner or someone else. But why? Why would the phone need to be taken off Dylan? Not so much the value it holds to the person taking it to make money off it, no, but probably to avoid any more tracing, tracing of evidence, tracing one's whereabouts. If you got to dispose of Dylan, you're probably best doing that afterwards and disposing of the phone first of all, right? It makes sense because if the phone remained turned on and Brenner was unaware, let's say it was Brenner, of the phone on Dylan, buried Dylan somewhere, hid him, and that final phone ping was near a dirt mound or near a shed, let's just say something rough like that, then people would go all the way down there, look around for the phone ping in that spot, and then eventually find Dylan, right? So you've got to separate Dylan from the phone and the phone from Dylan to try and confuse people, right? So there's a level of importance to the suspect in disposing of it, right? But in terms of retrieving the phone, which was retrieved, more about that later, it didn't lead to any new leads or key information evidence in the case, right? Sure, there was phone pings from here to there, but it's not led to finding Dylan. It's not led to a direct conviction, so that's why I don't think it's that important. Though, it's interesting how the phone was found before the wallet, and yet arguably the phone is more important than the wallet. So, makes you think. But though, then again, as I was saying, both the phone and wallet may have been on Dylan, and because the suspect found out about the phone and wanted to dispose of that to reduce the chances of Dylan being found if the phone was left on Dylan, that's why there was a higher priority over the phone compared to the wallet. Okay, let's move on to the next one. In fifth place, the key fob. You might be wondering, why the key fob? What's the reasoning behind that? It was returned, so what's the big deal? Well, number one, it was returned by someone. Why would someone return an item, right? It was also cleaned of evidence, fingerprints. So someone has made possibly a conscious choice to try and reduce it being traced back to them, whoever it was that returned it, right? Was it guilty conscience? Was it to try and make things not look as suspicious? Or was it to cause more confusion? Who knows? The key fob itself is Dylan's key fob to do with Dylan's truck. Okay, it'll make more sense later on. Now, when you compare it to the previous two, okay, the wallet, the phone, the key fob, how does the key fob lead to a conviction or Dylan being found? Not quite explainable, right? You can't really explain that or come up with a reason. Though, the key fob would have been used for another purpose previously, maybe when disposing of Dylan. The key fob would have been needed, which tied hand in hand with the likes of a vehicle. Okay, it'll make more sense shortly. Let's move on to number 4. Number 4, Dylan's gun. Yet another item returned, similar to the key fob. Now, why does the gun have more significance over the likes of the key fob? Mainly down to the use of it. That's the way I see it. With it being a gun, it could well be an item that was used to hurt Dylan or to even kill him. You might be wondering, well, is there enough evidence to prove that? Well, there's been some talks about bullets being found somewhere or missing bullets in the magazine. Candice Cooley isn't too confident on that because she can't remember how many were loaded in that gun at the time, which is understandable because why would she know? You know, it's Dylan's gun, only Dylan would know. The other thing what we've got to take in mind, the likes of Jim Brenner, who is known for collecting and hiding guns as well as using them in the past. He's got a long history of shooting people, said by Esquadra, okay, in one of those news reports in the past. The Maryland shooting, fatal shooting, I think there was a few more after that too. So if Brenner is known to shoot at people for whatever reason, rage, snapping, disagreement, work dispute. He just so happens to be in possession of firearms or comes across one at a point in time, then this could have been used on Dylan. That's the way I see it. And as well, it's also strange how the gun, similar to the key fob, was returned back. You would think that the person that returned the key fob must have returned the gun, because it would seem even more strange if different people went back to the trailer one after another each day to return the stuff back. Unless it's to make it seem less suspicious. But if that was the case, all it would do, it would highlight that there's more than one involved, if not more than two people, right? And then it would make you think, wow, was there some kind of pact, some kind of agreement or something? Just make you think. Now the gun itself, no fingerprints, no DNA linking to anyone else who may have used it. So that's interesting. Yeah, you can leave your thoughts to what you think about that down below. I mean, bear in mind the photo of the gun on this slide may not be an accurate representation of Dylan's actual firearm. Take that in mind. And also Dylan did have a spare firearm, a shotgun. I don't know if it was a sawned off one or a standard shotgun, but that was a spare one and was away from it, so that one doesn't really matter. But this one does, because it was taken away in the first place, right? You could understand the key fob being taken away if it was used for a certain purpose, such as with the truck, right? As for the gun though, why would you take that away? Well, like when you've seen with murders, assassinations, someone gets shot, that item that was used is going to be taken away and hidden, concealed, destroyed or buried, whichever. And that's what happened for a certain amount of time with this one. But for it to be returned back is a little bit odd. And it also makes you think, how was it retrieved? Or no, how was it taken in the first place? Was it taken off Dylan? Or was it taken from the truck? And if it was returned back by the same person that took it in the first place, why did they not return it back to the same spot where they found it, right? Just to avoid any confusion. It makes sense. Unless the truck wasn't around at the time. That would be one way of looking at it. Anyway, let's move on to the next slide. Number 3, Brenner's phone. You might be wondering, a phone? But surely earlier on, you mentioned Dylan's phone in 6th place. Not that significant. So why would Brenner's be any more important? Well, it's because it's the only phone ping data which is not available. We've looked at Dylan's phone ping data and you see it mapped out on Google Earth. I can even share that with you later on. I've got you covered with that, don't worry. With Brenner's phone ping, it's unknown of. And because of that unknown of, that uncertainty, it creates more mystery. It creates more intrigue. Almost creates more of an importance, higher significance, because it's like the question of, I wonder what's on there. Is there any phone calls, any text messages between Jim and Don, maybe? Confessing, communicating post-disappearance of Dylan, saying, have you hidden this yet? You still need to do that. Have you got my back covered? Don't say anything to anyone. That type of stuff. Or anything to do with the horse and Kurt Wadsworth. That level of communication. And, in more importance, the actual phone pings. Now, aside from the data itself being wiped, that'll be explained in a second. If the phone was turned off and remained off, then there wouldn't be any phone pings whatsoever, so you must understand that as well. But let's just say the phone ping were present because the phone was turned on during the process of taking out Dylan and disposing of him. that phone would have pinged in key locations on the journey of taking Dylan wherever, right? So if you was able to retrace the final phone ping of Brenner's before returning back from wherever, then that could be where Dylan would be at. And obviously, we can't find that because what was said by Candice Cooley was with Brenner's phone, it's a flip phone. It's an old one. It's limited, restricted. After 7 days, the previous data, I guess call logs, phone pings would have been lost, and there's nothing you can do to retrieve that. So that is unfortunate. You could say, well, then this holds no significance in the case, but I'm ranking it in a sense that all these items could have been up for play and could have all been retrieved in some way or another, right? That's the way I'm doing it. I'm putting aside the restrictions and limitations and just basing it off raw importance of the item, whether it leads to finding Dylan or revealing a new important, interesting lead. And I believe with Brenner's phone, it could have led to new leads, new locations on trying to locate Dylan's remains, most likely now, and / or hearing and listening in with maybe conversations, and if it reveals any new leads of suspects that need to be taken a look at. You know what I'm saying? That's the reason why it's in that order. Now, you might be wondering, well, could this have been successfully recorded and noted and the data collected? Yes, it could have been. It was possible with Brenner's phone and his data, but police were too slow to act on it. They didn't confiscate his phone immediately. And in a way, it can make sense because at the beginning of the case, you're going to treat certain people as possible suspects or persons of interest, but no arrest made at that point, right? And then with time going on and then arrest being made, then they might have confiscated items, brought him in for interrogation, questioning, and then took some of his items to look at or sent to the lab, like with his trailer, okay? But, that would have been past a 7-day period of phone data, so it's kind of pointless. Now, let's just say they arrested Brenner immediately, not on charges with Dylan, but just to do with catching up with the pending arrest in 2021 of Bivens, the 70-year-old attacked with a lawn chair and kicked repeatedly in the head and stomach whilst on the ground. And that was responsible by Brenner and his actions. If they arrested Brenner then and took the phone off him and analysed it and noted phone pings, even though it hasn't really got much to do with Dylan in that arrest, they could have still noted it down and got a hold of that key information. So then fast forward on, when Brenner becomes a prime suspect in the Dylan Rounds case, they could look back at the records and the books and say, oh yeah, previously we noted this information down and now we can use it to possibly, make progression in the case. But none of that happened. It could have happened, it could have been done, could have been successful, but it didn't. Let me know your thoughts about how important Brenner's phone is, the data and the pings with it, okay? We'll move on to the next one. I guess the only other thing you got to take in mind, Brenner's phone wasn't disposed of from the looks of it. Dylan's was, but Brenner's wasn't. So maybe that's worth taking in mind as well. It's not like a burner phone. There was some talks previously that there was an additional secondary phone used in some way. Maybe that was used to communicate with another suspect, right? Another person involved in it. But that additional phone has not been found. But then other people said the confusion was the burner phone was in fact the cloned one by the family, which is innocent and explainable. Anyway, let's move on to the second most important piece of evidence in the case of Dylan. Number 2 is Dylan's truck, more specifically the truck data. I believe this is one of the more important pieces of evidence leading to finding Dylan, as I feel that this vehicle was used in the process of disposing Dylan, right? We link back to the key fob. Remember the key fob to Dylan's truck? It was missing for a certain period of time, then returned back later. The only reason why you would take the key fob away is if you used it in the first place for something. There's no point just stealing the key fob just for the sakes of it. Most likely you took it because it needed to be used for another thing you were using, which would have been access to Dylan's truck, to be able to drive it, maneuver it around, get about, and dispose of Dylan that way. Someone like Brenner, who's lazy, isn't going to walk miles upon miles to dispose of Dylan or drag his body. No, Brenner could be more the guy to kind of drag Dylan into the back of the truck and then drive on somewhere and do it that way. And some people could be like, yeah, but has the truck really been used though? You know, it's found at Dylan's place of living, his farm, his trailer. But, you know, it's one of those things. The vehicle was returned back to the place, just like the key fob and the gun, which were done at a later point. In addition, things to suggest that the vehicle was in fact used around the time of Dylan's disappearance would be the mud on the truck, right? Under the wheel, the arch. All the mud collected there, bits of mud around the sides of it. Arguably pressure, power washed, cleaned down to remove any evidence. And this is the thing, inside, the seat adjusted, put forwards so it's easier to reach the wheels and pedals if you're a smaller person. Brenner was a shorter person compared to Dylan. In addition, all-wheel drive turned on. Who else would turn it on? Someone who's unfamiliar with the vehicle. Dylan wouldn't do it for the sake of it, so most likely it was someone else, right? Now, aside from that, you look at the truck, okay? People have questioned about it being pressure washed, power washed. It could have been natural. The rain caused it. But if that really was the case, then why was there no DNA, fingerprints, evidence found in or outside of the truck? It must have been cleaned in some way or another, right? Now, I'm just basing it off how it was worded. There was no prints, no DNA found. If, for whatever reason, it was badly worded and they basically meant from like what Yaz Gilson reposted on Facebook in those words, if it's more to do with no external evidence was found of another individual, but Dylan's was still on the truck, then you could argue that Dylan was the last one to use that truck and it's not been used since, during Dylan's disappearance or post-disappearance of Dylan, right? That's the only other way of looking at it. Rain itself, that's the thing, rain itself couldn't wash away DNA, I believe. Use some kind of chemicals, some kind of solution to break down the grease, such as the fingerprints, the marks, any residue of anything from someone, bodily fluids, whatever it may be. You know, you clean it down thorough, then it's going to reduce the likely chances of evidence being recovered, right? That's the way I see it. And for the seat to be adjusted and things to be changed about and even it just being locked, all unusual behaviour if used to associate it with Dylan. So someone must have done it. And it wouldn't even make sense for someone just to unlock the car, sit inside, adjust the seat, sit there for a few seconds and then get back out and then lock it. That wouldn't make any sense. The only reason why you'd step foot in that vehicle is if you were going to drive it. And if it coincides with a person going missing and you're one of the main suspects, then there's a high chance that you must have used it to dispose of the victim, right? The missing person. That's how I see it. Now, you put all that aside, And as I was saying at the start of this reveal, more specifically, the truck data. What about it? It's the data of the truck, the distance, the mileage, GPS maybe, revealing the location, the last known location, the route it took on its previous journey. That's what's most important. If it was available, it may have revealed where Dylan's whereabouts are, his final, let's say, resting place, burial, or it might have just proved whether or not the vehicle was actually used on that Saturday or not. You know what I'm saying? Now, why has it not been retrieved? Well, where do we start? So when the family came over, the likes of Justin Rounds, Candice Cooley, around that time or so, it was Justin Rounds that broke entry into the vehicle, which probably wasn't the best thing to do, but he did so. It could have ruined potential evidence right there, but he broke on in just to have a look. I don't know what he was exactly looking for. You know, if someone's gone missing and they're visibly not inside of the truck, then why do you need to break inside of the truck if it's locked up? Okay, it might seem a bit odd it being locked, but what are you expecting to find in there? Is it because of the gun, which turned out to be missing? Is that why Justin was so desperate to check inside just to make sure to see if the gun's there or not? Because if it's not, then it could mean Dylan's in danger, possibly. Someone else has took it to use it on Dylan. Maybe that was going through Justin's mind at the time. But that's not why the data was lost. The reason why the truck data was lost was later on, where it be Justin, Candice, or someone else, or both together, when they were driving it. Now you might be wondering why were they driving it? Well, first of all, even though it's a crime scene, it wasn't officially classified as a crime scene, nor treated as one. No tape, none of that, no restrictions, not as, strict in general. And it was the LE that gave the green light ahead to say, you do whatever you need to do. Giving, or let's say passing the responsibility onto the parents. Now, the parents, you could say, should have known better to not touch the stuff or move it, but, they took it, they drove it. And because of driving Dylan's truck, as described by Candice, unknown to her at the time, different to a GMC in that data, with the Ford of Dylan's, once you start driving, there's that previous 100-mile distance, route, journey you took beforehand, that data is wiped, right? And that's it. And then from there on, when you start driving, it'll record whatever. And then once it gets to the 100-mile mark, it probably records it, stops. And then if you start driving again, it will eventually delete it. So you understand the pattern now. So that is most unfortunate, in my opinion. If the truck data wasn't lost, if the truck remained in that spot, wasn't touched, was properly assessed, they could have found the data, which may have led to finding Dylan. If this truck was used to dispose of Dylan, that truck probably would have gone to that spot where Dylan was disposed of, right? Common sense. I mean, you could argue that the vehicle might have parked up somewhere and then there was a bit of walking involved and then Dylan was dumped, but it would at least provide maybe new leads, or just at least dispel any confusion regarding was the truck moved or not, And just to link back to that, because talks are saying there's no tyre marks on Dylan's place of living. It's not moved since, so yeah. But then there were tyre marks elsewhere near a wash or so, which were linked to Dylan. So, it must have been used for some kind of activity in recent time. So you'd probably believe more likely it was used, right? Now, if you think different, feel free to list it down below. Now, if I believe the truck is one of the most important pieces, then why is the key fob not hand in hand with it? Well, I mean, you could make the argument and say they're both equally as important. You know, you wouldn't get the truck data if you didn't have the key fob to be able to drive the truck and then go somewhere and then for it to record it. You know, I understand that, but it's just one of those things where you look at Brenner's phone, the pings on that would have been more important than the key fob, right? Because and as well, the gun as well. You know, as said, it's just one of those things where you interpret it how you want, right? You might have a different order. You might even group certain things together, right? But one of the main reasons why it's in this order is because the likes of the truck data was never recovered, nor can it be. And that's kind of significant in itself, alongside with the significance of information that could have yielded a new result and a new lead. The likes of the key fob is in this position because although it may have been used with the truck and it was the suspect behind it and in control of the key fob, it's that idea that the key fob was returned back. It's not missing, it's not a mystery, it's kind of been tied up. Unless there's additional mysteries and points to look at, such as Kurt Wadsworth having the key fob in his own pocket, in his own hand at the time, and then returning it back himself. That could open up new possibilities, but because there's no evidence, no prints found on the fob, you can't really tie it to anything or anyone. So hopefully that makes sense, right? I said gun there just because it may have been used. Brenner's phone because with or without the truck, Brenner was in possession of his phone when disposing of Dylan in whatever way. That in its own right could have led to finding Dylan. This is what I mean. Two main possibilities. The truck data, which may have been used to dispose of Dylan, which could have led to, up to the spot where Dylan was disposed of, and / Brenner's phone if it was in possession on him. Now, the only way these two would become completely irrelevant would be if the truck data, if there was evidence which came about into light that proved that this truck of Dylan's was never used, and the only time it was last driven was by Dylan himself Friday night, then that would dispel that, and then it would mean this wouldn't be as importance, right? Because if you knew of that and then you checked the data, if possible, then it would just basically say last 100 miles was of saddle saw bar and basically Montello, which was Dylan, so it wouldn't mean much. And the only reason why this item would become less significant as well is if the phone was turned off or not even in Brenner's pocket at the time of disposing of Dylan. You get what I'm saying? You might have made a call to someone like Don and then left the phone in his trailer and then got on with things, because not everyone carries their phone about, right? Maybe more people now or younger people do, but someone like Brenner, he might not carry his phone on him much because there's no real need or purpose. So I just wanted to explain my reasoning to why the phone and the truck data could become completely irrelevant and of less significance if both were not used or present at the time of disposing of Dylan. And if that was the case, would I change any of these items in order? I'd still say the wallet remains in 7th place. Dylan's phone, I'd still say is more important than the wallet. The key fob, well, that would become irrelevant, right? Not so, because if Dylan's vehicle, for whatever reason, was not moved and it just remained there and Dylan was the last one to use it, then why would this key fob have been taken away? As we understand, you don't just take a key fob, you don't steal someone's key and then not bother using it. If you're going to steal a key, you're stealing it to use it for something, right? It's common sense. So really, this is the one piece of evidence that really hammers it in that Dylan's vehicle must have been used, despite all the claims which could go against it, right? The only other possibility would be, for whatever reason, the key fob was dropped by Dylan or someone, and then another person picked it up, and then at a later point thought, oh, I best return it back to the scene of the crime so I'm not in possession of it because it'll make me look bad. That's the only way of looking at it, really. But I just don't think there's high chances regarding that. As for the gun, well, it could still hold some form of importance, like it was used on Dylan, possibly. The fact that Dylan's gun was and always has been stored in Dylan's truck, that could explain to why the key fob was used in order to gain access to the truck, maybe adjusting the seat, looking for something, possibly accidentally turning all-wheel drive on when, messing around with your hands, reaching in, reaching about, accidentally activate the all-wheel drive mistakenly. And whilst you're rummaging around, you eventually find Dylan's gun, you take it with you, you lock the door behind, and then move on. This is what I mean. They can have stories of their own, these items individually, whether it be leading to the post-disappearance of Dylan or in the process of hiding things, right? That's the way I see it. Key fob either used mainly to dispose of Dylan, to drive the truck, which led to truck data in the end, or key fob being used on the truck to get access to Dylan's gun to either use on Dylan or just to take away as a memento. So these items can link onto one another in some way or another. Brenner's phone. Yep. Now, I guess we just move on to number one, right? Because we're still stuck on number two. Number one is Dylan himself. And why would you say Dylan is evidence? Well, it sounds dark, but due to the amount of months it's gone on for, if you're going to find Dylan, it's most likely remains of him, just because of how long things have gone on. They've not found Dylan yet. So if he was locked up somewhere, held hostage, is he being fed? Is he being looked after? Or maybe the likes of Brenner being arrested, can't visit him anymore, and Don Hately is out and about elsewhere. Dylan might have been neglected and starved. Either that or killed on the spot, then buried, And the reason why Dylan turns into evidence is because of his remains. You find his remains, then it can prove that Dylan was killed, meaning it's homicide, right? If you rewind back, it wasn't originally classified as a homicide case, was it? It was seen as a missing person case, no foul play. But as time went on, it turned to foul play, eventually turning to a homicide investigation. Though to understand, I believe from what Candice Cooley said, it's not been officially adjusted or titled homicide by the LE, which is typical, but to be expected by them. Though it makes sense for it to be a homicide case now, due to the evidence in the background, the case built upon Dylan in the background as well. There might have been a level of silence, but there's been procedures underway. But from what some of the detectives or sheriffs said at LE, Box Elder County Sheriff's Office, and even Candice Cooley, is that, might have a solid case or a substantial amount of evidence at the moment, but to nail it on, to get a true conviction, we basically need to find Dylan, him or his remains, right? And remains can be used as evidence to prove something in a case, in a court, in a trial, right? If the likes of Brenner, let's just say, is the main and only suspect. I'm not saying that's ultimately the case, but if it was, okay, you got some evidence, some stuff to back it up, but just to secure that conviction and to make sure that he serves a long sentence, if not the death sentence, if people really wanted justice in some way, then finding Dylan would be the main goal, right? And bringing him back. But also, even aside from that, the reason why this is one of the most significant things, you probably shouldn't say things because it's probably poor wording. The reason why evidence and finding Dylan, aside from the whole court case, would be bringing closure to the family as well, which will it'll cause some form of pain in the short term, finally seeing him, in that way, but it gets rid of that mystery, that uncertainty, right? Because just like the odd few items out there, whether it be Dylan's clothing or maybe another possession item of Dylan's which has not been retrieved, and the wallet too here, that uncertainty can make people feel a bit worried, a bit uncomfortable. So it's all about reducing the pain as well, aside from a conviction. And as I said, if you did it like a pyramid, if you arranged it in a pyramid, Dylan would be at the top, and then below it, that would follow through, could be the truck data, Brenner's phone, maybe the key fob if you want to put that before the gun, and then Dylan's phone if you want to put it in that order. You know what I'm saying? One item leads to another. One piece of equipment leads to finding Dylan. That's the way I see it, okay? Now, if you've got a different opinion, you can list it down below if you want to. Now, let's transition on over to Google Earth and just briefly map out where these items were found or returned, okay? Here we are. Now, before we continue, one of the main reasons to why I'm doing this is basing it off the significance of evidence in the way I arranged it. It doesn't quite tie in line with how they were found or retrieved, right? It's one of those things where, the most important pieces of evidence should be concealed, destroyed the most. The least significant stuff, where it holds no value to the criminal or to evidence leading to finding the person who's gone missing, they might just be disposed and chucked to the side of the road. That type of order. Now on screen, I only have the phone pings, but, as for the other bits and bobs, I can explain that, right? The other items. So, if you're unfamiliar, as for the phone pings, ignore the colourful lines scattered about on the maps. They're irrelevant in this video, okay? All that matters is basically the markers of the pings, and the very first one appearing at the gate, which, would have been in Dylan's possession at the time because that's when he made an actual call to Karen, which was the grandmother, okay? 6:51 a.m. And then after that, it led to the second phone ping being at the grain shed. Could have been explained by, parking the grain truck inside, which was his main goal, so in possession of it. The third one being back at his trailer, his farm, if you want to call it that, over here, which could be explainable. Dylan's returned back after doing what he needed to have done, but then it gets a little bit more grey, more of a grey area, because the fourth phone ping is back at this location on the property of the grain shed, but towards Brenner's trailer. So is that when Brenner was in possession of it, maybe? That's where the main questioning comes from, right? The final phone ping over here. Well, originally the marker was here, the final phone ping. The phone was found at Lucin Pond. So this is one of the, one of the items which I've mentioned on the tier list beforehand, and this is where it was found. So you can say a level of effort was used to dispose of the phone. Okay, it might not be far enough, maybe a better idea would have been to go east all the way over here, maybe, to find a pond or where water could be. I can't find it on the spot, but you know, going over here or something to try and dispose it, even chuck it in the river there, the lake, okay? But that wasn't done. Maybe because it was laziness, couldn't really be bothered, but you can agree that a level of effort was used when disposing of the phone. And why chuck it into water? Well, it's like an attempt to dispose of it, to remove any more tracing, because if that phone is turned on at any point, it's going to be pinging away. So if people, come to retracing it, they'll be able to track it down. And that's kind of like what happened here, So it's like a ticking time bomb. You need to get rid of it fast before it, blows your cover, right? So that's what was done. And I guess it destroyed the phone or damaged it partially. The family were able to clone Dylan's, so they still managed to get access. If any of you know the condition of the original phone of Dylan's itself, was it working or was it completely flat, completely dead? I mean, in the past when one of my phones got a bit of water on it, heavy rainfall, it didn't fall in the ocean, it didn't fall in a river or lake or pond, but it still messed it up. It was usable, but the SD card was knackered. So if you dump a phone in a pond and it's submerged in water and it's remaining there for a couple of days, if not longer, then I'm sure it's going to damage it, right? I don't exactly know what brand, what make, or the year of Dylan's phone, if it's a smartphone, if it's an Apple iPhone or Android, I'm not too sure. The only reason why I say that is because some phones nowadays are a bit more designed better, a bit more durable, resilient against water damage, and it can survive under a certain depth of water. The pond at Lucin isn't that deep, so it might have survived. That's all I'm saying. But end of the day, whoever disposed of it, what was going through their mind was, we need to get rid of this, because if I keep a hold of it, the police are going to trace it back to me directly at my trailer, so I've got to get rid of it. As we know, the fourth phone ping being at Brenner's trailer, if it remained there, and that was the final ping, then it would seem a bit more suspicious, right outside of Brenner's trailer. So Brenner must have been present, Brenner must have been in possession of it, or that's where Dylan was taken out. But by moving the phone ping over that way to the pond, it kind of, makes it a bit more sparse, disperses it, reduces that suspicion directly leading to Brenner, though with, the future evidence and stories coming out, it kind of put Brenner back in that spotlight, so not exactly great, okay? But you get the overall idea that Dylan's phone, that it could trace whereabouts, you need to get rid of it, right? You don't want to be in possession of it when disposing of Dylan, because then that would lead to probably finding Dylan very easily. So that's the main reason behind that. So there was a level of thought going on there. It wasn't a stupid move by the suspect. As for the wallet, as said, that's unknown of. There's no markers, it was not found. But as for the gun and key fob, as well as the truck itself, if it was actually used, the truck was found at Dylan's farm, which would appear that nothing of suspicion, though it was altered with inside, as described, and possibly washed down, with the key fob and gun being returned at a later date, one after the other, I think overnight time as well, to probably avoid detection. Unfortunately, no cameras present to prove otherwise or to reinforce who it could have been that returned it. That would have really, really helped, but once again, that was lacking in it. But this is the part where it makes you think, wait, what? The gun and key fob are arguably much more important than the likes of Dylan Round's wallet, right? Do you agree in chat? Why is Dylan Round's wallet still missing compared to the likes of Dylan's actual gun and Dylan's key fob, right? Why would why would the wallet be missing and be so hard to find? It's a wallet. It's not as important, right? There's not as much contents within there. And for once you can be proven that it wasn't taken or used, because as I said, bank accounts haven't shown any transactions. So really, it's just complete waste of time taking it away. Do you think that the suspect or a suspect stole Dylan's wallet? Or do you just think it's on Dylan still in his pocket, trouser pocket, possibly? The reason why I'm a bit confused by it is because why would Dylan need to have his wallet in his pocket if he's doing farm work? You know, he doesn't have his gun on him when Dylan's doing farm work, and you thought a gun would be more important than a wallet in that situation because you might come across a sticky situation. You might get hurt, you might get trapped. If you get trapped, you might be able to use the gun to free yourself of whatever, right? If you get in danger because of wildlife, a coyote, mountain lion, or another person trespassing, you can use the gun to scare them off, right? If you've got a wallet, what's that going to do? That can't be used. Sure, the wallet probably was and most likely taken with him in Dylan's possession at the time, the day before, the 27th, because he was at Saddle Sore Bar. He would have had to paid to maybe buy a drink or buy some food. That's the last transaction, right? That all makes sense. If he's got to refill gas, possibly in his truck, that explains that. You know, you need a wallet then. You need some money possibly, or just use the card, whichever. That all makes sense. But then the day after, why would it still be on him? Take it out your pocket. Leave it in the trailer. The gun's more important, and yet that was left behind in the truck. So why would the wallet be of any more significance when it isn't? Unless, and it's just a possibility, that Dylan forgot to take the wallet out of his pocket due to the night before. The night before, coming back from the bar in Montello, would have needed money because it was late at night coming back, let's say, okay? I don't think he was drunk, not from the looks of it. Got back to his farm and then proceeded doing seeding late at night, 11:30 p.m. to 11:45 p.m. Could you argue that's a short amount of time? Doesn't seem to take that long. I understand he's using equipment, machinery, so it will get the job done faster than if he used to manually do it, but is it a little bit too quick? Did he complete all of the seeding, or was he only doing so much of it? That's what you got to try and understand, because he said he was parking the grain truck in the grain shed the day after, so clearly there would have been seeds still remaining in the truck, so maybe Dylan only had a certain amount of time or a certain amount of space, crops, to be able to do this planting, the seeding the night before, and then the leftovers, seeds remaining. We were like, right, well, because of the weather, there's not enough time, we'll just park it and then return back to it at a later date, maybe. And with a lot going on in a short amount of time, and that responsibility and that focus, you know, if Dylan can leave food out on the side in the trailer, then he might be forgetful in leaving his wallet in his pocket when he should have taken it out and left it in the trailer. And then if Dylan's taken out, attacked on the day of the 28th, dragged somewhere, hidden, concealed, that wallet probably will still remain in his pocket. Though, if there was items such as the phone on Dylan in his possession at the time he was taken out, you know, you think of it. When someone is attacked, ambushed, if they're being robbed or killed, they'll be searched afterwards, won't they? It's a normal thing, right? The suspect will rummage through the person's pockets, jacket pockets, trouser pockets, looking for anything of interest, money, cards, a key code, keys, key fob, all that type of stuff, right? As for the key fob, that was probably in the trailer, possibly. But yeah, you'd probably be searching through. And, you know, if Dylan's in possession of the phone and then's taken out, it just seems like that you thought you would search through the pocket, maybe for money, look at the wallet and think, oh, nothing of interest there. But would you actually think of putting it back in his pocket, in the dead person's pocket? Or would you just literally chuck it behind the back of your head like you've got zero care? That's what I'm trying to say. And this is what I'm trying to roughly speaking. So if you take in mind that a conscious effort was made to dispose of Dylan's phone a bit further away from the farm and trying to destroy it, trying to suppress any more phone pings, any more tracing of location. But then everything is all undone when the likes of Dylan's boots are placed back here. Now, apologies, I seem to have failed to include the boots in that list as stated. Now, where would I put it on the list? I'll have to think. I'll go for each one. Dylan's boots are probably... Do you know what? Let's head back on over now so I can visually describe it to you. So apologies about cutting on over quickly, but it needs to be included this as it is a piece of evidence and it was in fact retrieved and found. And it kind of is in the middle of it all, to be honest, because it's a possession of Dylan's, but there is the question of whether it's new or an old pair, but also as well it being tied with Brenner because evidence being found on it, but also evidence linked back to Dylan, which also links back to the possibility of foul play. So there's a lot going on with the boots. But in terms of how they were disposed of, that's the most questionable thing compared to the other items of less significance and importance, if you want to call it that, okay? So where do I think it lies? Well, I don't think it's number one spot. I would say if the truck data was retrievable, which I know it isn't, but let's say it was, and let's say the truck was used and can be proven that it was used during Dylan's disappearance, and that Brenner's phone, providing the ping data was retrieved, I'd say the boots go before the truck and the phone. So I think the boots are more important than number 4, Dylan's gun. I think the boots are more important than the key fob, phone and wallet based off how they were found, the suspiciousness of them and the data they provide, because you look at everything else, okay? You look at all these items. How many of these items yielded data? Well, the wallet is missing. Dylan's phone, although found, did not retrieve any leads. Not much, right? The key fob, it was cleaned down. There was no fingerprints. No DNA tied to anyone else. It was returned, which is a bit odd, but that's about it. If trail cams were set up, like Jim Terry said, then it could have made this piece of evidence more important because it would have been reinforced with actual footage, leading to a new lead of someone out there, right? I could have included trail cam footage as a piece of evidence in this, but there is no footage or important evidence that can be tied with anything in the case, really. I mean, I'd probably say that the trail cam, because cameras were set up out there in certain spots, I'd say the cameras are more important than the wallet, but less important than the phone, because the phone was retrieved and it was disposed of in a suspicious way. The trail cameras didn't capture Dylan going missing, nor items being returned because they weren't in those areas. All it captured was the odd few explorers going out there like salty pancakes. So you could say externally, away from Dylan's disappearance case, the trail cam evidence footage could be very vital and important when going through some like legal proceedings of people trespassing and getting them done for doing that. That's the only way around it, really. Now, as I was saying, we return back to these items. Which of these items yielded data? Wallet, no, because it's still missing. Dylan's phone, it was cloned, but nothing was found on it. Key fob, it was cleaned down, no DNA upon it. Dylan's gun, it was cleaned down, no dodginess, no evidence upon it. Brenner's phone, okay, it might have been looked at, but ultimately no data found. Truck data, no data found. It was only Dylan's boots, really, right? Dylan's boots. Do the boots lead to Dylan being found? No. Do they lead to a conviction? Kind of. It's a strong bit of evidence alongside maybe other stuff such as in the grain shed because of that hole being dug out, but I don't know what evidence that was. People keep it tight-lipped and other people might share it between one another and drip feed it down the line, but I don't know, so that's why I've not included it in this video. But I do think the boots are probably more important than most of these other items just based on the actual evidence found on them, right? That's what I would say. But I'd say the likes of the truck and the phone, if the data was returned, these two are more important in finding Dylan, right? And this piece of evidence is just as important in nailing a conviction, or at least being halfway part of the puzzle in finalising the conviction. Because of these boots and where they were found and what was found on them, I'll explain further. Let's just transition back over to Google Earth. With them being found here near the dirt mound, 100 yards away from the grain shed, which is over here. First thing, I don't know exactly what order, but basically DNA was found on it, which basically linked to Brenner. Brenner touched the boots, picked them up and placed them down at the dirt mound because that's what Brenner said. That's what probably happened. Did he tell the full story? Obviously not. He's not going to say, oh yeah, I put them there because I just killed Dylan. No, most people aren't going to confess that quickly. It wouldn't make any sense. But in terms of how they were disposed of, there was a lack of care involved, which is an important point in itself. But aside from Brenner's DNA, what also appeared on one of the boots was a droplet of blood, which from the lab report said it was of Dylan's. Now, if a person's gone missing and the boots are left in an odd spot, it's like, well, why are they detached from the person? Why have those possessions been taken from them? That's not exactly normal. So that in itself highlights suspicion, right? Where it was found and how it was found, dumped behind a dirt mound, is suspicious. The fact that there is DNA on it, which could highlight foul play, Dylan getting hurt, the blood, and it being of his, is suspicious. The fact that there, as said, that Brenner's DNA is on it could highlight that maybe Brenner's the one that is responsible for all of it, and that he confessed to putting them near the dirt mound. It could really tie it in all together, right? So, when you look at how the case has gone, and you look at all the other evidence and what could have been evidence and what could have been retrieved if done correctly, the significant scale and the hierarchy does change and can be altered with. But if we're talking about real time, like right now, being realistic, probably the boots are some of the most important pieces because that's what's led to the case being treated serious, well, kind of serious, and, coinciding with what's ever found in the grain shed as a homicide case, a foul play one, and not simply a missing person case, right? Maybe without those boots, if you never found them or there was never blood on them, then maybe it would still be seen as maybe a missing person case, That's what I mean. But let's tie back to this whole map analysis of where things start going wrong, right? So who knows what order exactly they were disposed of or taken away. But as said, the phone in the pond, that seems like a smart idea to try and conceal, to try and reduce being tracked. But then the items of Dylan, another possession of Dylan, boots. Why would you take the phone over to Lucin Pond, cover that distance to dispose of it, and then just leave the boots, which probably were on Dylan at the time when he got attacked, and just leave them near the dirt mound? You see? The phone and boots are important pieces of evidence and are both possessions of Dylan. If you're going to take one away and cover some distance to get rid of it, then you should do the same with the boots. Maybe, there's two ways of looking at it. Maybe one, the suspect for one item is more important over the other. So like the phone is more important to get rid of because it can be tracked and traced. but the likes of the boots can't be tracked or traced. But the boots are still important because if there is DNA on them, such as the blood and Brenner's own prints, then it kind of like makes you look like the main suspect, right? So the only reason or the only way it could be excused, which didn't happen, would be if the boots were treated like the gun and key fob. They were returned or just placed back and cleaned of any evidence, right? This is what gets strange. So what this person has done, the suspect, has taken the phone to the pond, made a conscious effort to destroy it, but then the boots, which are just as important, which have all that evidence on, and the blood, I just thought, right, they're not as important, I'll just chuck them there. And then the gun and key fob, which are just as important because, yeah, more possessions of Dylan, and maybe the gun could have been used to take out Dylan, a murder item, were returned back, which is a bit of a weird thing to do, back at Dylan's trailer. You wouldn't normally do that, right, would you? But there was a conscious effort made to clean it down so there was no evidence or DNA prints. So it's kind of a smart and stupid move. The stupid move is returning the items back. If you took them away in the first place, you shouldn't return them back if you're the criminal. It just makes it seem very suspicious and it puts you in it. You know, it would make more sense to just throw them, dispose of them as far away as possible, if not just destroy them, blow them up, burn them if possible, right? And yet they didn't. So that's a bit weird how they will put care into some items to be disposed of, but then not for other items. Though the only smart move in this case with the gun and key fob was they were cleaned down, arguably like the same with the truck. So, you know, maybe the person wanted to return it back to make it seem like it was never missing, and maybe to confuse family members if they've been searching, because I think Candice Cooley said we've been searching for it thoroughly and did not see it there, but then the day later then it appeared, so we would have known if it was there beforehand or not. So it could have been an attempt to try and confuse people, to do it quietly in the night so that no one's aware, and then if people do see it they'll probably think, oh, nothing strange about that, I guess we just didn't look properly. No, it's not the case, but I think that might have been the reasoning to why it was returned, and to clean it down would be so then it doesn't trace back to the person that returned it back. So that's a smart thing to do, but returning it back is not the smart thing to do. As for the boots, it wasn't a smart thing to just dump them behind the mound in open sight, and it wasn't a smart move to just leave them as they are. You should have at least cleaned them down. So if we're talking about the three items here, at least, the phone, the boots, gun and key fob, in where they're situated, kind of spread out, right? It's almost like in a straight diagonal line, right? Although I haven't got all the markers on. You look at that yellow line, we'll use it as an example. That yellow line from there, from the farm to the grain shed, is in kind of like the direction of where the items were found, and then the final one, the Lucin pond. It makes me believe, due to this very strange behaviour, the patterns of how the items were disposed of, or if they were returned, whether they were cleaned or not, from everything I've just said just then, because it's a bit random, a bit careless, but also smart, some of the choices and decisions made, such as the phone, it made me believe that there was more than one person involved, not just in possibly taking Dylan out, but more so disposing of Dylan, or at least some of his items, right? Now, someone like Brenner, he doesn't seem like a master criminal, doesn't have a mastermind. Candice Cooley has referred to that beforehand. Maybe other people might think the same. If Brenner is lazy and a slob, then he could be responsible for placing the boots near the dirt mound, right? And the reason why I say that is because Brenner's probably like, oh, do you know what, I can't be bothered, really digging a hole or driving distance just to hide the boots. I'll just chuck them behind the mound. No one will find them. He's lazy. He's not going to put effort in, is he? So that could explain to why that poor decision was made. It'll be reinforced with obviously the evidence of Brenner's prints on the boots, which have been officially confirmed. So that could explain to why Brenner's responsible for that. Is Brenner responsible for the phone, though, being disposed of at the pond? Well, this is the thing, and I know I've not mentioned it on here, but I will add it in, okay? Well, I'll talk about it. Are you ready? Because this is very important, okay? I hope you're listening. It's very important. So from what Candice Cooley has said previously in an interview, Jim Brenner said he was in his trailer all day during Friday and up to Saturday up to 2:30 p.m. After 2:30 p.m, he went to Lucin Pond and then went on to Don Hately's barbecue, okay, which is in Lucin, nearby. Ty Corbin said recently that Don Hately's RV trailer was west of Lucin Pond and near to the power line. We will look at that later if there is time. But what I'm trying to get at is Brenner really responsible for dumping the phone at the pond or not? Maybe Brenner passed by the pond, but maybe he didn't dispose of it in that way, because that seems like too much of a smart idea for him. Would he honestly think, oh, I must dispose of this phone to make sure we're not tracked? You know, if he's dumb enough to leave the boots out near the dirt mound, and that's a fact, then why would he be very cautious and thoughtful in how he disposes of the phone? It seems unlikely, doesn't it? Making a poor choice and then a smart choice. That doesn't seem to fit with his behaviour. He just seems lazy. I mean, you could say it's a lazy way of disposing of the phone, but still, it required some kind of thinking. And you could be like, well, yeah, but Brenner could still have done it because he went to the pond first before going to Don's. But this is where we add in a key bit of information. So as we take a look back at this brief bit of information, as we looked at previous, it says Round's wallet and phone are missing. As we know, the phone has been retrieved since, but it says everything else appears normal at the farm. Cooley says police got a ping on the phone that was at or within 15 miles of his property on Saturday at 3:41 p.m. That was supposedly described as the final phone ping. And we did map that out, of course, as I showed you before. And near to that final phone ping is the pond, and that's where the phone was disposed of. Okay, so what's the issue? Well, it says 3:41 p.m. there on Saturday. Can you see? 3:41 p.m. Now, if Brenner left his trailer at 2:30 p.m. to go onto the pond, then what? He just stood around for like an hour or so and then decided to chuck the phone into the pond. You know what I'm saying? From 2:30 to 3:41 p.m, the final phone ping. There's a bit of time in between, right? So this is how I see it. Brenner got out of his trailer at 2:30 p.m. on a Saturday and then took the back route, highlighted by the green marker, as we described earlier in previous videos, taking the back road from how Candice Cooley worded it in terms of the phone ping, coming to this point, coming round here, final phone ping being round there, as you can see, eventually reaching the pond here, Don Hately's place of living being west, so over in that direction somewhere, so it all ties in line with one another. But it wouldn't have taken an hour to get from Brenner's trailer to the pond. Not at all. So 3:41 p.m, the final phone ping in this area, that must have occurred later. So was Brenner in possession of that phone ping when going to Don Hately's? Or did Brenner leave Dylan's phone behind in his trailer, and that's why that was the fourth phone ping, if you remember? Brenner went to Don's over that way somewhere. We'll look at it later, okay? Went over this way somewhere, and then they hung out. Maybe that's when Brenner confessed and said, look, I've hurt Dylan. I've taken him out. I've done this. And Don's like, oh no, how could you? Right. Okay, we need to get things in order. We need to dispose of Dylan. You know, right, you go and do this. Go over there and do that. And then I'll sort out the other stuff. Maybe that's how it worked, right? I don't know how smart Don Hately is. I mean, he must be somewhat smart to throw Brenner under the bus to worm his way out, like a snake in the grass, thinking about himself, avoiding being arrested himself, maybe pinning the blame more onto Brenner, you know, that level of thinking. So he might be a bit more alert, he might be a bit more focused and aware. He knows what needs to be done and what doesn't. And someone like Brenner is a bit more, oh, I'm lazy, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, oh, I snap, I get really aggressive, but then afterwards I'm like an ape. You know what I'm saying? So if Brenner had any responsibilities of disposing of evidence, most likely it was the boots, right? As for the phone, that could have been more to do with Don. Don thinking ahead, Don thinking, oh yeah, we need to dispose of it, went to the pond and got rid of it. Now, what about the key fob and gun? Returning that back. Would that have been Brenner or Don? Or could it have been a third person such as Kurt Wadsworth? That's always a possibility because it has been talked about before. I came up with the idea with the whole decoy theory back then when Kurt made a call to the parents about Dylan being held in Montello, said he all went down there. And you know what? It feels like that's been debunked because when Candice Cooley came out with the misinformation saying, oh no, it occurred on different days, you know, the phone call, the hostage situation on a different day, a day before or two, the gun and key fob was returned. But all I can say and think is maybe if it was like a 1 to 2 day investigation where police, family were down in Montello, focused there, and it lasted 1 to 2 days, then that could excuse and explain why the key fob appeared those days. Because the police and family were still away from that scene. So it opened up the opportunity for someone to return the items back, right? So you could still tie it in that way. Yeah. Do you see what I'm saying? Hopefully. That these items, some are more important than others. Like, for example, let's compare just two together to show that extreme contrast. Because I think, apologies if there is a few cut-ins throughout this video, it's just shit's going on in the background, or there's distractions, or my mind's not working. So apologies if it cuts in and out. But basically, after what we've talked about, how we've analysed it, how we've assessed the level of importance each piece of evidence has, if we was just to focus on two, one least important, the other most important, providing both have been found, retrieved, located in some way, then a comparison, a fair one, can be done and conducted right now. Are you ready? So what we'll do, let's compare the phone with the boots, okay? The phone, Dylan's, how important is it compared to the boots? You can leave your thoughts down below. I would say the boots are more important than the phone due to how they were found and what was contained on them. There was more evidence found on the boots than on Dylan's phone. But Dylan's phone was taken care of better than Dylan's boots when it came to disposing of it. So why is there such a contrast there? You see what I'm saying? Shit, the tripod. Down here, the phone is located at the pond. Concealed, submerged in water, probably sustaining water damage, meaning it was harder to retrieve info. Though, okay, they could clone the phone, but that's not the point. There was effort made to destroy evidence, putting it in the pond. The boots over here, found at the dirt mound, not even buried in the dirt mound, just chucked by the side, with evidence still remaining, which was the prints of Brenner, but also blood of Dylan. Now, if you're a criminal and you notice there is blood on the boot, then you're gonna burn it, aren't you? You're not gonna wash it. You're gonna burn it or bury it or both. That didn't happen then. And as I said, the way the proceedings have gone and how evidence and leads have followed and the court case and all that stuff going on behind the scenes, that's partially because of the boots. The boots have played quite an important role. Can you agree with that? That the boots and the evidence found on them definitely highlighted and was the catalyst that sparked the whole foul play situation. Even Candice, Cooley and Justin agreed back at the start. The moment they found the boots, because of how they were found, and not on Dylan, with also blood on them, they said their heart sunk. That something bad must have happened to Dylan, because it's not a normal thing to find boots like that, as well with blood on, because if that's his only pair, then why else would he take them off? It wouldn't make no sense. So, hopefully you can agree that the boots are more important than Dylan's phone in terms of the evidence retrieved from them, right? So, with taking that in mind, if the boots are more important than the phone, then why was more effort put into hiding and destroying the phone over the boots? You see? Boots are on site. The phone was taken way over here. Why is that? If you're going to dispose of one item and do it fairly well, then why not do it with the other item? You get what I'm saying? That's what makes me believe that maybe more than one person was involved. Brenner had the responsibility of disposing the boots. Don had the responsibility of disposing of the phone. And then maybe somebody else was responsible with the key fobbing gun. Maybe. Because it just doesn't make any sense. And maybe when they got together and said, right, you disposed of that, you sorted that one out, yeah? Brenner, what about the boots? You know, is that okay? And Brenner's like, oh yeah, don't worry, man. I got that under control. No one's going to find these boots. No one's going to come to them anyway. They're all in control, man. And obviously, not under control. It fell through. They found them very easily. So, that's what I think. Because as you know, I did do some kind of behavioural pattern of Brenner himself, mapping it out in the theory of, oh, it's just Brenner and Brenner acting alone, and this is how he followed his plan of taking Dylan out and how he planned disposing of items from area to area. But after looking at this, after looking at the importance of the items and how they were found and how they were treated, it's kind of random, right? If it was the simple idea that the wallet was found dumped on the floor, the phone was found in the pond, and the boots were found burnt and some charred remains or something at an ash pit, then you could say, well, that all ties in fine and is kind of understandable. It's suspicious, but there's reasoning behind each piece of item. The wallet, well, there's not much to that. Just chuck it aside. Got no use for it. The phone, get rid of any traces of being tracked. And the boots, well, they were on Dylan. You got hurt. I've noticed blood on them. I need to burn them because it was all a part of the crime scene. So, yeah. So that would have made more sense, but obviously that's not the case. And I think this is just one example of how strange the Dylan Brown's case. It might not be a complete deep mystery because it's been treated as like true crime, it's been treated as foul play and homicide, but in terms of the weird patterns, there's no consistency. Can you agree with that? And with no consistency, it makes it quite difficult to track who is present and who is responsible for what, right? If you had a person that had multiple personality disorder, they're unpredictable. 1 minute they're this, 1 minute they're that. First they appear nice and friendly, but then they're very protective and defensive. It's like, whoa, you know, what do we expect here? What's going to go on? And if there was such an event where the order of something was so mismatched and all over the place, you could think, well, maybe it's them, you know, if they're having an episode or if they're in a certain mood one day, but then feeling different later on. It could impact how they react to the environment they're in, how they act in it too. But Brenner seems kind of like this. Lazy, 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 snap. Lazy, lazy, snap. In the moment of snapping, acting out, hurting someone, is that when it triggers being disorganised, not thinking straight, adrenaline? I don't know. But if he's lazy most of the time, there would be a level of consistency, whether it be a level of consistency in leaving trash all about, or a level of consistency in leaving all the items out and about. You know what I'm saying? Now, we might as well throw it in briefly. What about the spring cleaning? There was an effort made there by Brenner, putting stuff in bags and taking it away. Where did they end up? Could it have been something similar to what Tyne Lands found with the bag of bones, but not literally that one, but there could be another bag of bones elsewhere? Possibly, but I don't know if we'll find out about that. Maybe the bags were taken to a waste disposal, a landfill, a tip. Maybe, but there's not really much talk about that. Though I think someone mentioned in a comment in a previous video that there's some investigation going on at one of the waste disposal places. I'm not too sure. Correct me if I'm wrong, or if you're currently here in the chat, reinforce or relay that point, because it could be very important. So you could say, well, there you go. There's a level of inconsistency once again. Brenner leaving the boots out, which is a main piece of evidence, but then carefully bagging stuff up in the grain shed and then taking it out and then disposing it, which is a smart thing to do. A bit late to the party, right? Should have done that right at the start. But he still did it nevertheless, so there was a conscious effort made to get rid of anything out of the grain shed and take it somewhere else. So then, how does that explain that? Well, this is the thing. Don Haley plays a part once again. Maybe it was Don that said to Jim, "Hey Jim, are you sure you moved everything? What about that in the grain shed? Did you move that?" And Jim's like, no man, I forgot all about it. Should I move it?" And Don's like, "Well, hell yeah, you should. Get your ass into the shed now and move it." And because Jim may feel invincible at the time, or he just had the perfect opportunity and he was very lucky because the police couldn't be arsed, they just sat back. So Jim literally just walked past them completely, "Oh, whatever, man," and just collected all the bits of evidence, the remaining stuff, let's say, bagged it up, took it out, put it in his truck or somewhere nearby. And that's when Candice Cooley then talked about in the interview about Don and Jim heading to Wendover. Maybe the whole plan of the spring cleaning was orchestrated by Don Haley. You know, if Don may have been responsible for disposing of the phone early on, he had it locked in. He knew what to do and how to get rid of stuff, or to try and get rid of stuff. And Jim, a little bit slow, a little bit behind, right? And it was Don that said, "Right, you need to get rid of the stuff from the grain shed and then we'll take it somewhere with us later to maybe Wendover." Do you see? Now, why didn't Don go into the grain shed and assist Jim with the spring cleaning? Maybe because it might have looked more suspicious. Maybe Don is playing almost like a puppet master in helping Jim, but at the same time keeping involvement limited so he stays out of the picture, right? You get what I'm saying? If you involve yourself too much in helping someone in a crime, then you become a part of it. I mean, you're already a part of it in the first place if you assist them, but if you keep things at a distance, you don't get too involved or too close, you're not seen, you're not spotted with that suspect, you can kind of stay out of it. And if you tie it all in with also covering his own back with handing that .22 caliber rifle in to the police, it kind of makes him look like a good person. You know, a good person in going against loyalty. Oh my God, there's a firework in the sky, what the hell? Going against loyalty to save your own skin, but also to keep the community safe in a way. But obviously, I don't think he cares about keeping the community safe. He just wanted to use that as almost like an alibi to say, "What? I would never assist Brenner in helping him dispose of evidence. I would never do anything like that. Why would you think that? You know, I surrendered that gun in and, you know, gave this information to you, the police, and then you arrested Brenner. So, you know, if I'm doing that to my friend and putting him in prison, then in jail, then why would I assist in it in the first place? It wouldn't make any sense. So that's what could happen, right? I think we'll leave it there. Bear in mind, I'm not sure if this video will come out the day it's recorded because it is late now. And I think this was actually a longer video than expected. Apologies about the Don Hately's location. It's too late to show you that right now. It is really late. So I might edit this video tomorrow morning or something and then upload it for later on. I'll just see how things go because it is late. We'll see what happens next. We'll see if there's any other evidence. If you have any thoughts, opinions, questions, feel free to list it down below. If you have a different ordered tier list of items of significance in a different order, list it down below and your thoughts behind that stuff, okay? So I hope you enjoyed the video. I will see you next time. For now, thanks for watching and goodbye.